Every time Earth loses one of its endangered species, then the Earth's biodiversity is pretty much thrown into chaos. And this not only affects our wildlife population. This actually affects life and humans as well, and puts us in a bind. And if you look closely at what it's doing, while the biodiversity is collapsing, you can see some of the surface effects that it's having on humans. But then we're also going to take a look at some of the effects that you may have missed of what's going on with our wildlife. Now, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the sum total and the variety of life on Earth, from plants to insects, animals to humans, from the gene all the way up to ecosystems. That's what the biodiversity is. Now, in Liz Kimbrough's online article that was posted by Manga Bay, they actually touched on the GBO5 Center, their rehearsal of a set of targets called the anti-biodiversity targets. And this was a set of 20 targets that was set back in 2010, in which they wanted to meet by 2020 to increase the decreasing and collapsing biodiversity. Try to get back in order. Try to get it back in order. And the shocking news that she reported was that none of the targets were actually hit. About 89% of the targets did show some form of increase, but none of them were actually even close to being hit. And that's a scary target when we all see what's happening. Now, what is happening? What are some of the surface level effects that is going on when you see the biodiversity collapsing? When you look at the collapsing biodiversity, you also got to take a look at what it's doing to humans. Now, humans are feeling the effects, or humans are actually causing the effects. First off, by deforestation, overfishing, overfishing, and the overburning of fossil fuels. I mean, this is stuff that's causing climate change, is causing or putting us our health and our security in a vulnerable position. And not only that, you see the effects on us because now we're seeing a shortage of food supply, and that's why we're having to put steroids into our food to try to, of course, make it enough. And then you're also seeing, not only that, you're also seeing us be more susceptible to diseases. You're seeing us, oxygen is something that's super important to us, but we're dealing with deforestation and how fast we're cutting down the trees. So these are all things that are becoming a huge issue. Now, in Catherine Earnhardt's Crossroads of Humanity, Earth Biodiversity is Collapsing article online that was published by the New York Times in September of 2020, she touches on some of those effects, i.e. being the lack of food supply and how the lack of food supply, how oxygen is affected, how we're more susceptible with our health and our security. And then not only that, how our wildlife is definitely being cut down in massive numbers because of these things that we're doing. And when you look a little deeper into it, you'll actually see that it's not just humans that are being affected, but one of the major effects is on the wildlife. I mean, in Sophie Lewis's online article that was posted by CBS in September of 2020, she actually quoted the Worldwide Fund president and the CEO, Carter Roberts, and he actually has something very interesting to say. He said the human footprint expands into wildlife, and this is actually taking a huge chunk of our wildlife, but it's also leaving us susceptible to the increasing our chances of getting zoonotic diseases. And he actually made a mention that this is actually something that the COVID-19 may have come from, because it's actually been reported that it could have come from bats, or it actually started with bats. So that's something that is an example of how it's coming back, and in tenfold it's affecting us. But she also had something very, very eye-opening to say, that about 70% of Earth's wildlife has been cut down in the last 50 years. Now, 70% is a huge number. As a matter of fact, the endangered species list is over 1 million now. You got about 500,000 animals and about another 500,000 insects and plants that are now added to the list. And for generations to come, they're going to miss out on the opportunity of seeing and enjoying some of these animals. And it's going to be because humans are overstepping their boundaries and stepping out into their territory, which is cutting them down. Now, you're asking, what's one way that it's affecting us? Let's take a look at the woodpecker, which is on that list. They eat nuts and seeds that come from trees, and then they transport them through their feces to different areas where we can get additional trees to grow from that. And when they die out, you lose a good percentage of what the trees that are coming from the areas that they were located. Now, you're asking, how can we help out? So that's what I want you to do. I want you to challenge yourself. Think about what you're doing and what you can do and how you can help, of course, save our wildlife. And in return, you'll actually find that it'll make the earth a better and more safer place for us as well.